Okay, start by telling us your name.
Yeah. My name is Dr. Sheyadi, medical doctor, writer, formerly chairman, Association of Nigerian Authors, Abuja chapter.
Okay. Um, do move the chairs. Okay. Now, talk to us about how Nigerian literature in Africa, particularly Nigeria, has come of age right from pre-independence.
That's a very um, big assignment because in the manner of speaking, that would mean writing the history of Nigeria entirely from the scratch, talking about the individual nationalities that make up pre-independence Nigeria, uh, the different nations that were present here before the entity called Nigeria evolved. Because unlike what many people think about literature, literature is never static, you know, and writing dates back a long time, way long time before the colonial um, interventions came to be among the nations that make up Nigeria. Especially if you go up north, where we had so many kinds of writing thriving uh, under the Sokoto Caliphate in those days. Notably among the writers of those times, was Uthman Dafodio, who was a scholar of repute in his own time. And that's talking hundreds of years ago, some hundreds of years ago, you know. A scholar, a poet, a writer by every standard. The fact that these people were not writing in English does not mean that they were not involved in rigorous literature. The rules of literature in those days and now are similar. You know, they strive for excellence, they strive for aesthetics in their writing, and that is commendable. You know, now coming down to the time that we had colonial presence, the visitors from the west, so to say, and who now imported um, the English tradition of doing things into our various communities, including the literatures of the English people, you know, and then we had a lot of interaction with our home people, our people trying to imbibe new stock of knowledge, and naturally, when you imbibe new stock of knowledge, you become a new person, and you most likely will churn out new works in different dimensions, including literature. And so we can say effectively, if we are going to restrict ourselves to that time, then we'll be talking about the new literature that started with the arrival of the visitors from the West. And then we had a new kind of literature beginning to blossom in different pockets across the nations. And even then, that is still a big assignment because at that time, is more like a transition. Yeah, largely people in the Yoruba parts of Nigeria then, there was no Nigeria then anyway, uh, were more familiar with the oral tradition, you know, oral tradition as against the written tradition that is already firmly established in the northern part of the country. And so it varies from place to place at that time. And none of these people were going to let go of what they've been used to over time. So what we're going to have eventually was going to be an admixture, something new, like a hybrid coming up, you know, up until the time that the English culture per se, including English literary canons, became firmly established across Nigeria. Um, so it depends on which pockets, which area we're really looking at, and which aspects in those areas we're looking at.
Okay, Tutuola's work was seen as the pioneer of new literary form based on his ancient verbal style. Well, how would you react to that? Talking about the palm wine drinkard, he pioneered African literature.
Yeah, Amos Tutuola was a symbolic figure, and his work, the palm wine drinkard, and his dead palm wine tapster in the Dead World remains a classic for very obvious reasons. One, it was the first written work in English to be published outside of Africa, authored by an African. You know, we've had in Nigeria, we've had several literatures published before, but not in English. You know, and from his own parts of the country, from the western part of Nigeria, we've had more established writers even then at that time, like Dio Fagunwa, who was published earlier on. He had his work, one of his most celebrated work, The Forest of Gods, published I think in 1949, but it was a Yoruba literature basically. So Amos Tutola's work was like something unexpected. He had written that work in 1946 and waited until 1952 before he could celebrate its publishing by Faber and Faber. Not because of anything, it was because nobody was going to give him attention. No, none of the publisher was willing to consider his output as anything of note to go through the press before Faber and Faber took that bold step to publishing. And immediately that work was published, it signaled its intention to gain a particular space in global literature. It attracted different kind of opinion. First was condemnation, both from home and then from abroad. And then was commendation, both from home and then from abroad. Because he himself was an unschooled person, if we're going to look at it for what it was then. He was an unschooled person, having very, very basic elementary education only. And that was all. And drawing on very deep inner strength, he was able to bring out that kind of output and write and wrote in what is classified as modified kind of Yoruba English at that time. And so it drew attention immediately, not because of the fineness of his writing, because that was lacking in that work, not because of any ingenious thing that he had done, but because one of the time that the work occupied. You know, destiny bestowed on that work that significance in the first instance. And then secondly, because he was bold enough not to hide that which was important for the world to know about where it was coming from. And that is the Yoruba metaphysical mythology, which was an important embodiment of Yoruba cultures. You know, whether oral tradition, whether literature, whether in dance, whether in poetry, whichever way you want to look at it, that was a strong component of the Yoruba culture. And he was not willing, he was not ready to embellish that culture in any kind of artificial coverage. He was willing to put it out to the world to see. And that also shook the world. As at that time, the word magical realism had really not been coined. It was only